Ovanåker is a small and famous municipality amongst people who are interested in the Swedish history of natural philosophy and scientific discoveries, due to a simple reason that it is Anders Celsius' birthplace. He left a large pile of geographical measurements, astronomical surveys, and meteorological observations before the idea of evidence-based knowledge was accepted as a viable research method. However, our objectives of this road trip is to learn an emotive emigration history which took place in the middle of the 19th century. Two famous authors, Vilhelm Moberg and Selma Lagerlöf, were so inspired by this journey that they created two intriguing novels which school children are still reading today.
Do you want to take a trip with me? Not to anywhere, but to the mysterious past, when people still dress like this and talk properly to each other, and whenever they want to pray for anything, they will say Amen at the end of the conversation.
Development of various farm tools as a consequence of Industrial Revolution, especially availability of sturdy iron ploughs and harrows, changed the expectation of farming efficiency. Suddenly, intensive labor tasks such as digging, steering, and overturning of soil are no longer unaffordable agriculture preparations.
Life was wonderful here in Hälsingland. There were no nobilities who want you to pay taxes without any service in return. Although they are quite pious, but it is kind of far away from the congregation, from the church. And what you do with all the nature resources around you, you work hard to build your own empire.
Agricultural revolution transformed the labor structure of Hälsingland. With the aid of iron ploughs, they could dig rough surfaces thoroughly. Thus, farmers across this region could expand their arable lands rapidly. Furthermore, development of agriculture management resulted in a higher production per unit area. As wealth poured in, affluent farmers began to construct lavish farmsteads with sophisticated construction techniques. Some of them ordered decorative wallpapers from Southern Europe. Others hired accomplished artists to paint the walls in salons.
Before the time of infrastructure, before the time of automobile, before the time of internet, greatest social event is of course the feast, the wedding, the christening, the funeral, and from time to time it's just so nice to drink together, to talk about the everyday warriors as well as to talk about the hopes and dreams. This is a family mansion which has been populated with people who love this land and love this architect style. So please follow us to see its interior. It will blow your mind.
A typical Hälsingland farmstead is made of several houses, each of which is designed for a specific purpose. It was common to paint the timber houses in fall red pigment. The most theatrically decorated room is the salon for festive events. In the resident house, the quintessential Swedish Kulbit style originates in the middle of the 17th century. Most objects were made of natural materials such as wood, iron, virgin, linen, and wool. In the 19th century, it was common for villager painters to wander around, painting interiors and selling furniture in exchange for board and lodging.
The farmers in this region were always extremely rich. They could start their own church and they could also decorate their house, and this is the basic idea of the quality of life. Many of the farmsteads were constructed back in the age of discovery. The exotic, the far away, the mysterious landscape, culture landscape, natural landscape, the savannah, was somehow every farmer's fantasy about something that is even more sophisticated than divinity.
The relationship between ordinary people and Christian church was problematic in the first half of the 19th century. Nevertheless, it was mandatory to be present at the High Mass. Furthermore, priests act as intellectual barricade through house interrogation. The priests could come to different households regularly to check if everyone could memorize the main passages in Lutheran's little catechism. The purpose was to confirm that no one was trying to bring forward any novel ideas that were contrary to the correct belief. Sadly, church duty, a form of public humiliation, was sanctioned by law. The condemned citizen was tied in front of the church to humiliate that person. The most common crime was failing to appear in high masses repeatedly.
We all know this triangle of life. When you have the basic satisfied, what is the most important thing in life? That is actually freedom. And what kind of freedom? Freedom to do whatever you want, or freedom to think?
Radical French ideas developed by the enlightenment thinkers, as well as the shift of lifestyle through the vicissitude of the Industrial Revolution, incentivized a large number of progressive young people to rethink who should act as their spiritual leaders. With the increased literacy, Lutheran priests lost their intellectual authority. A famous earlier nemesis was Eric Jensen, a wheat flour salesman and a charismatic lay preacher from Biskopsskola. Religious contemplation occupied a large portion of his life already in childhood. At the age of 22, he had an epiphany after falling off his horse and hitting his head. Jensen believed that he was charged by God to preach his words. After intensive Bible studies, he was convinced that he alone had understood the true relationship between the Lord and his followers.
Oh, it was a long walk. I'm thirsty, I'm tired, but finally we're here to see where Eric Yongsong gave his lecture about God. This is actually quite tranquil place. Again, I think intellectual freedom is probably one of the most important things when I have clothes to wear, when I have food to eat, and when I have some money to spend. Because at the end, we're thinking, we're contemplating, and we're dreaming about who we are in front of others and inside ourselves.
Eric Jensen was probably a fanatic. However, he understood how to soothe a poignant soul. Also, the importance of mutual help. Part of Helsingland suffered from poor harvest in a few years. Prayers were never answered by the Lutheran God. Jensen conducted meetings to demonstrate his version of religious utopia and burned many religious works of Martin Luther. Such actions were not tolerated by the pious congregation. Many cult members were mistreated by their next-door neighbors. Eric Jensen was arrested several times. At last, he escaped to New York with a sailing ship under an assumed name.
The sailing trip from Gävle to New York 200 years ago was really not a holiday. Many people died and many people became sick, and they still see America as the promised land, a land of opportunity. While living in the US, they even refuse to use their mother's tongue to communicate with each other, which is an experience that I personally recognize. You do not leave a country because you're comfortable. You leave a country because life was impossible.
12 followers joined him in Bishop Hill in Illinois. highly disciplined genius rice crops and livestock, and wove carpets in their utopian colony. They lived under a communal system. The productivity was very high before the community was struck by the contagious cholera. Why do we want to learn this complex history today? I think the first step to grasp the complexity of society is to accept the fact that each human is an autonomous vehicle. We could train the system with manual. However, we could not predict how the engine would develop the most optimal driving strategy through its journey.